All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my space. Hopefully, people will be joining momentarily. This is going to be a very personal space. Um, it is going to talk about um, how I seriously changed my mind on some matters. It's also going to talk about how I returned to a lot of the instincts that I had when I was younger in my 20s. And so I'm glad to get a lot of this stuff off my chest. I think it's very important, and and certainly, we can you guys can chime in as well. I won't be able to go like 3 hours or anything, but I'll definitely be able to go an hour or so. Now, what sparked this is, and I would say sparked it, didn't cause it. What sparked it is a lot of my many haters online, got so many, are posting a lot of there's posting screenshots of tweets in which I will say things like, we've had NATO for 65 years, and under that time, you know, Europe has been Islamified, and there's been all this mass immigration, etc. I've made statements of, Putin is a powerful white leader, and he wants the best for his country. Things like that that are fairly benign, actually, even defensible to a certain degree. I remember in Charlottesville, there was a chant of Russia is our friend or so on. I could go on, but I don't think I need to. I will say this: I'm not going to erase any tweets. I'll leave them up there. I basically have to own them. And I think I've triggered a lot of people. This invasion of Ukraine has been absolutely divisive among the right in general. You see a lot of division in the mainstream right. Tucker going one way, Hannity going another. You see that throughout the dissident right. Although I would say that making a casual estimate that the dissident right is probably 75% in favor of Russia. Um, that's my estimate. I might be wrong about that. And you see some real flamboyant defenders of Russia, like Nick Fuentes, Tsar Putin. He's fighting our battles against the globalist and so on. I don't think I need to go further than that. Um, I own every tweet that I've ever sent out. I don't delete tweets. I'll only delete them if there's like a spelling error, and I'll usually repost. I'll own it. The buck stops with me. I will say this, and there's a lot more to this story, but during the period of, let's say, 2012 through 2018, I was I first off, I was married to Nina Kuprianova, who is a ultra nationalist. Like many ultra nationalists, she's also an immigrant. I guess with an E. She immigrated to Canada in the 1990s, and you see a little bit of the zeal of the convert with her. Um, I would say this: I will own every tweet, but I will also say that she also had access to my Twitter account during 2017, and many of those tweets are hers. But I guess at the end of the day, they're all mine, and I'm not going to erase a single one of them. And I'm also will admit that that was the direction that I was thinking at that time. There was a lot of there was a lot of noise about, and this is why I, on some level, understand the dissident rights position today, although I do strongly disagree with it. And I think that taking it at this point in time, when there is a full on invasion and just terrible suffering, I think it is unthinkable to be taking these positions. This war is indefensible. And yeah, we can have a long conversation about NATO expansion and provocation. Totally legitimate conversation. We can have a conversation about how the West could have nipped this in the bud and solved the problem earlier. That's also a highly legitimate conversation. I might agree with many people who are sympathetic towards Russia in the sense and in terms of the things that NATO or the United States could have done. But that is water under the bridge at this point. And if you are actively defending this war, you are putting yourself on a side for no reason that I can see. You are putting yourself on the wrong side of something, and you cannot get out of that. And to just jump on this bandwagon when it doesn't, Russia's military strategy in Ukraine does not seem to be an essential matter for any of these people, Americans and the dissident right or whatever. The fact that you would go all in on this issue and you can never get all out. You have made your bed and you're going to have to lie in it. It is indefensible and, from my perspective, unthinkable. And you are, at the end of the day, you have jumped on the wrong side of a situation in terms of a geopolitical struggle that involves the country in which you live. And again, there's a word for that, and that word is traitor. I've said this numerous times. I've said this to people privately. I've said this to people publicly. Take it or leave it. It's just my advice, but I am right on this. I'll go back a little bit to my thinking on these matters. So, as many of you know, I was born in 1978. I was a child during the Cold War in the 80s. I was a young person in the 90s, post-Cold War, kind of the end of history decade. We didn't know what was going to happen. NATO was used in humanitarian interventions that I imagine if I were older, I would have opposed. I didn't really oppose them when I was a freshman in college or whatever. And then I kind of became a young man in the 2000s when I was, developing a political consciousness, when I was engaged in the political scene to a very small degree, but still engaged in it. And American foreign policy at that time was, of course, dominated by 9/11 and the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, etc. And I also opposed these things. Now, it was also a factor in that was the 2004 crisis in Ukraine, which, was repeated almost in 2014 with many of the same actors, and then has now come to a head in 2021. But my consciousness of U.S. foreign policy was due to the Iraq War, and I think most anyone living at that time could be forgiven to think of American foreign policy as whacked out. We're invading an oil-rich country, Iraq. We're promising to send women to undergraduate college. The execution of that war is beyond terrible. You can agree with that, whether you agree with the decision to invade or not. And American foreign policy is almost at best adrift, and at worst, rather sinister. We seem to be doing all of the wrong things. And we're guided by neoconservatives, we're guided by humanitarian interventionists who want to, intervene everywhere and save the world, the kind of Samantha Power type, or the harder strategic humanitarian interventionist like Krauthammer or Wolfowitz, who want to, engage in preemptive regime change in nations that are oil rich and affect Israel. But it seemed to be all part of the same fundamental problem. NATO was adrift. After all, Russia, went through a lot of a hard transitionary time in the 1990s. But, why would we want to oppose Russia? Russia is our friend, as it were. And there's no reason to jump on Putin's back because he isn't a consistent liberal. Now, I would add something here. Um, as legend has it, and I think this is probably true or very close to the truth, Putin was the first leader to phone George W. Bush after the 9/11 strike. Bush went to Russia, he looked into Putin's heart or something like that, and he found someone he could work with in America's adventures abroad. Um, but that was my conception. Now, when I was in college and just doing reading on my own, and to a degree in graduate school, I mostly studied European intellectual history in graduate school, but I also studied the Cold War. I was very interested in NATO, and I understood NATO as using the term, gross realm, you could say, or sphere of influence. And I understood that it was an American sphere of influence, and first, and a Western and Central European sphere of influence second. But I did find that it was necessary. And I didn't agree with every opinion or every action, rather, taken by NATO, but I did understand it, and I understood it as a necessary, absolutely necessary, existentially necessary counter sphere to the Soviet sphere. Now, immediately after the war, Stalin believed that, you know, well, we did most of the fighting and dying in the Second World War. Yeah, sure, we promised, free and fair elections, but yeah, no one really thought that was going to happen. And Stalin believed that the capitalist powers in his mind were so selfish and lacking in vision that they turn against each other, and that hard times were imminent for Britain and other countries. And so soon they would have socialist and maybe even communist governments, and that sooner or later they'd kind of roll on in. Well, that never happened. And we went to a period not of a battle of small nation states, but a battle of a bifurcated world, a battle of two large spheres of influence. And however much we might say that, America and capitalism and the West is kind of nihilistic and all that kind of stuff, the fact is, those two spheres of influence were not created equal. Very few people, maybe no people, uh, jumped over the Berlin Wall to get into East Germany. And we really need to be honest about that, however critical we might want to be about the West. And I think a lot of it is warranted. That was a fact. And it wasn't a perfect system. The while some conservatives would say things like better dead or red, or we want to roll back the Soviet Union, etc. What happened, certainly under the influence of Kennan, the Mr. X paper, or the long telegram, was a containment strategy. That is to say, there was a lot of stability, and we weren't in these gross realm, these great spheres um, game that was being played. It wasn't a matter of lots of different nation states battling each other and playing this game of chess. If either of these spheres ever directly attacked one another, then yes, we should worry about nuclear annihilation. And so there was a brewing conflict, but that conflict was ultimately the source of stability. And I know that, however much you want to criticize the United States, that Western and Central Europeans were deeply grateful that they lived in that sphere of influence. And that was my perception of NATO when I was in my 20s and such. Now, the world had moved on. I felt that a neo Cold War was unimaginable. Um, Barack Obama agreed with me when Mitt Romney said that Russia is our greatest strategic enemy. Barack Obama, in a debate in 2012, Barack Obama effectively said, okay, boomer, uh, the Cold War is over. We need to move on. Barack Obama, looking back at him, actually often seems like a rather reserved and restrained Republican foreign policy leader. His interventions alongside Hillary Clinton in his first term aside, that is how he looks now. He didn't go into Syria even after a red line, quote unquote, was crossed. He showed a lot of restraint towards Russia. He did not try to engage in this level of sanctions after the 2014 Maidan crisis and the taking of Crimea and the kind of secession slash civil war, which was really terrible in the Donbass region. He was restrained in all of these things. Nothing happened in Georgia as well during the 2008 crisis. Well, we are in a different world now. This has been brewing. And I was talking with some friends last night, and I think with the Cold War, there's a lot of a good comparison could be made with the first two world wars in the sense that, no one was predicting war in 1913 on the eve of it. People were actually predicting lasting peace. Well, one thing led to another. Wheels started turning, and there was a continental wide war that was absolutely destructive. We had to wait between 1919 and 1939. We had to kind of wait a generation. And then the actors, although the actors were transformed, there were abdications of the ruling royal families, but in the case of Germany and Russia, most prominently, but we in a way had a reiteration of that conflict with some differences, of course, Italy being one. I think we might be seeing a similar situation where this 30-year Cold War period is a kind of interregnum, the interwar years, this period of American unipolar dominance, when the American military was going to be used for humanitarian interventions in the Balkans, for regime change in the Middle East. All of it goes poorly. And we, in a way, don't know what to do with ourselves. And we are now back in a state of a Cold War. These sanctions that we're seeing, they are not sanctions. I don't think we should even be using that word anymore. There is a bifurcated world, and we are back in it. We have re-entered the 20th century. You live in a sphere of influence, and at some point you need to take a side. All of the kind of romantic dreams, which I shared to a degree, about, oh, Putin, what a great guy, what a badass, what a traditionalist. That is over now. You cannot plausibly say that, for one thing. And for another, you are a traitor to your country if you are saying that. And I will not say that. I cannot say that anymore. So I do have a right to evolve, first off. I have changed my mind about certain things. And, look, yeah, sure, if someone's floating this way and that, every 2 weeks they have a new opinion, it's like a fashion. Sure, they can be criticized. If someone evolves, because time changes, because the phenomena changes, because you have new information to process, that's a good thing. I remember these hearing some Christian fundamentalists who said you should have an open mind, but not too open so your brain doesn't fall out. I thought that was pretty funny, actually. I think that's the right balance. You need to have an open mind, but not too open so that you're like a floating this way and that your brain is spilled out on the floor. But you do need to have an open mind. You do need to be able to change, and you do need to make decisions that aren't merely the product of who likes what. So, you know, Biden doesn't like Putin, therefore I like Putin. You know, oh, Marco Rubio, he's calling for a no-fly zone, so I hate the no-fly zone. This just hyper polarized, hyper partisan bullshit. Again, I think the alt right or the dissident right, whatever, they learned that lesson really well because they felt that during the campaign of 2016 that they were really doing something. That just being like jumping in, being a contrarian to the liberals, pushing agenda, etc. That was actually helping out, helping Trump win. It was having an effect anonymously on the world, and I actually agree with them. I think they did. I think the alt right had a huge effect in the election of Trump. I think it might very well have been decisive or indispensable in getting Trump elected. But you can learn that lesson and then never learn another lesson and keep doing that over and over and over again until the point that it just becomes pathetic and you're sharing, dark MAGA memes pretending that we didn't live through the Trump presidency. I also want to mention this. I think that the love that the right has for Vladimir Putin is an unrequited love. And what I mean by that is that when I would say pro Russia stuff, when I would, talk with, hobnob with people like Manuel Oxenreiter, etc., who are, to be frank, he's dead now, a pro Russian asset, a spy, if you will. When I was doing that, I had all the best wishes in the world for Russia. I understand that I am not living there. I understand that I'm not Russian. But I also thought of Russia as part of the broader European family. Different, of course, but I had all the best wishes in the world. Vladimir Putin has never had all the best wishes in the world for the West. Vladimir Putin likes division. Vladimir Putin likes the culture war. Vladimir Putin likes anything that will weaken NATO. He likes Brexit. He likes secession movements. He likes January 6th. He likes endless bitterness and culture wars and polarization. He loves that shit. Because that means he, unlike me and unlike the West, still thinks in a gross realm, sphere of influence way. And anything that weakens the West is good. It could be the alt right, it could be Brexit, it could be January 6th, it could be the anti war left, it could be the anti woke left, it could be the anti war right. Whatever it is, anything that is demoralizing is good. I would never in the world think about attempting to demoralize Russians. I would want to promote things that are positive for Russians because I have no ill will towards any Russian. That is not how Putin thinks. And so we have witnessed a kind of like transatlantic brainwashing strategy on behalf of the Kremlin, in which they have taken pre-existing biases and twisted them into things that are effectively pro-Russia and anti-NATO. And I'll just give you an example. I'll give you a few examples. The first one was something that was got a lot of play on Twitter a few days ago. It was Candace Owens, and she said a few things to the effect that, well, Ukraine's not a real country. Ukraine was invented by the Soviet Union and just became a country in the 1990s. I mean, give me a break. Putin, when he's invading Ukraine, he's just invading Russia. You can't invade your own country. That type of thinking. I said many of those same words. I mean, I think Nietzsche said somewhere, I think it might have been the Joyful Science. He said, when I hear my own words in someone else's mouth, I start to question them. That I'm kind of like that. When I hear memes that I was saying in 2014, now in the mouth of someone as just toxic and dumb as Candace Owens, I begin to question myself. Who is feeding me those lines? Why was I ever saying something that Candace Owens would agree with? Probably because I was getting fed those lines. And I'm not going to be anyone's puppet. And if I think that I am acting in that way, I will stop. And I will, in fact, furiously take the other side because I'm no one's fool. The other thing that I noticed was a tweet by Marjorie Taylor Greene in which she said, ah, um, Joe Biden, this embarrassing president, not my president. He's supporting Nazis in Ukraine. He calls conservatives Nazis, but now he's the one funding them over in Ukraine. Now, where is an opinion like that coming from? First off, there's of course a kernel of truth to it. Azov Battalion. Now, I think we should take a very we should have a nuanced take on Azov Battalion. They could be described as Nazis. They could be described as white nationalists. They could be described as skinheads or a biker gang. They're rough and tumble people. You could also offer a more charitable view of them, that they see the Maidan not just as an episode of Ukrainian nationalism, but actually as an episode of a European awakening. And they, in fact, wanted a Maidan in Russia as well. That is a Russian awakening to its Europeanness, anti-Putin. They also have no doubt are funded by oligarchs. They're funded by patted on the back by the Lindsey Graham and John McCain and so on. So I mean, I think our view of them should be nuanced. It's gray. It's not that they're evil Nazis that we're funding for no reason. So what basically this kind of propaganda, it takes a pre-existing notion that is Marjorie Taylor Greene, first off, is an idiot, so can be manipulated. And Marjorie Taylor Greene hates Joe Biden. Marjorie Taylor Greene also gets called a Nazi or a white nationalist or a racist or whatever. So she wants to throw that back in Joe Biden's face. Isn't it remarkable that Marjorie Taylor Greene is offering the same justification for the invasion of Ukraine that Putin is? Isn't that remarkable that she is spreading Russian propaganda? Now, she's not literally brainwashed in like a Manchurian candidate sense, of course. It's subtle, but it is happening. Just because something might be true doesn't mean that it is not propaganda. I mean, I'm reminded of a famous Lacan statement of, the guy who's obsessed with the notion that his wife is committing adultery. Even if it were true that she slept with another man, it doesn't lessen the pathological nature of his jealousy. So even if it's true that Azov Battalion is, on some level, a bunch of Nazis, doesn't mean that what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing is not propaganda. And it is. She has been brainwashed. in this very subtle way of brainwashing that we've experienced with throughout the Trump era and with things like QAnon, etc. And she is, at the end of the day, a traitor, an unwitting one and an unintended one, but a traitor nonetheless. I'm not a traitor. I also have a right to evolve in my opinion. I'm also not a fool. So all of these notions of, I just come out with these opinions to shock people, or I just want to do the opposite of the dissident right to differentiate myself, blah, blah, blah. Well, I do, to be to be fair, maybe overly fair, I do want to kind of trigger people a little bit. I do want to provoke them. Sure. That isn't the fundamental reason why I take these opinions. The fundamental reason, of course, is that I live here. I live in this sphere of influence called NATO, and I'm not going to betray my own country. Second reason is that the invasion of Ukraine is indefensible. And I'm associated with enough bad stuff as it is. I don't want to be associated with the bombing of a maternity ward. And the third reason is that I'm no one's fool. Okay, there it is. Good. Rocco, would you like to speak?
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, this whole thing is a bit of a clown fiesta. I saw that thing from Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not particularly familiar with her, but she is a right-wing kind of up-and-coming politician in America.
She's a nut.
And yeah, I mean, I presume she gets some accusations of being far-right or Nazi. And then I see her on Twitter criticizing the regime for supporting Azov because they're Nazis. So it's sort of like everyone is throwing the Nazi mud at everyone else,
right?
Which is pretty funny, actually.
But do you know?
I mean, Azov.
Do you know who's not? The liberals have been remarkably nuanced about Azov Battalion.
Yeah, but Richard, you know why they've been nuanced about it? I mean, the way I see this is a great power conflict. This is a battle between empires for some land that's in the middle of the two.
Right.
And the reason that the liberal kind of blob are now suddenly, 1 week the Canadian truckers are like basically SS, they're like the worst Nazis in the world. And then the next week, these literal, the Azov Battalion, well, it's complicated, it's nuanced. Those guys literally nailed a guy. I don't know if you've seen the video. They nailed a guy to a cross, literally put nails through his wrists, videoed it, and then burnt him on the cross within the last couple of years, right? I mean, these guys are pretty hardcore. They don't mess around.
Okay, now I've heard that video, I've seen that video, and I've heard that might not be legitimate. But let's actually, for the sake of argument, let's say that it's legitimate. Okay.
Right. I mean, it might not be. It might not be, and obviously there's going to be a lot of propaganda around. Everyone's going to fall for at least something that's false. But my understanding, and it's I'm not an expert on the area. But my understanding is that they are pretty hardcore, and they come from the sort of football hooliganism culture. That's where they started. So I mean, the reason that the libs are suddenly being very nuanced about Nazism is because it's really. It's a conflict of empires, right? Putin is running an empire, or he's trying to. It's not doing very well, but he's trying to run an empire, which is also a diverse empire, right? He's got Muslims on his side, he's got Syrians, and he's also trying to recruit Black Africans to go and invade Ukraine. So, the idea perhaps that some people on the right have that Putin is going to be the kind of savior of Western civilization and he's kind of not corrupted. I think this is nonsense. He's just an emperor, of a different empire that has its own military goals and happens to have 7,000 nuclear weapons.
Right.
And I think that's where this kind of like suddenly the Nazis aren't so bad after all is coming from. It's a clash of empires. And yeah, I mean,
maybe they'll be a little more nuanced about me, huh?
No, they won't.
Well, we'll see.
Here's what they'll do. They'll be like
optimistic, don't you think?
they'll be like the Azov battalion, they crucify people, they coat their bullets in pig fat in order to shoot the Muslims and send them to hell.
Right.
We'll be nuanced about that, but Richard did this Roman salute thing once, and he's like, definitely SS.
Much
When are we going to send
worse.
him to Nuremberg? Like, no, this is the way this is going to work, right? Because we are living in clown world, and there is no you
Okay,
can't you,
let
you
me
can't
let me
you
let
can't
me
logic
push
these
back.
people out. Yeah.
I get it. I get it. But like, even saying when you say just something like we're living in clown world, okay, yeah, is there many kernels of truth to that? Of course there is. But like, we're also living in a real empire that Putin clearly hates and fears. Putin doesn't think that he is in a geopolitical battle with clown world. He thinks that he's in a geopolitical battle with NATO, with Germany that's rearming, with the European Union, which is very powerful economically. I mean, I think this is where I think like the right wing Twitter sphere just is kind of like a version of this kind of propaganda. It leads people into these like kind of lunatic notions that like you see a provocative video on Twitter about like gender reassignment surgery, and you think that that's like every child is getting mutilated, and NATO is just a bunch of like it's just a drag queen show at this point. They don't even have weapons. They just have dildos. Like you start to like fall into this trap of where you just get disconnected from reality. And it's like Putin likes that kind of stuff because that makes NATO a joke. It makes people demoralized about it. I have heard so many people effectively argue that when they're arguing against me, all they are effectively saying is that America is gay and NATO is gay. Well, that's not true. NATO commands thousands of nuclear weapons. NATO has armies. NATO has a much larger economic base than the Russian zone. Like, NATO is a real thing. And it's like, again, the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff, I get the unfairness. I don't support the truckers. I wasn't rather flamboyant about it, but like what are you protesting, guys, at this point? But I didn't support them. I obviously don't think it's fair to call them Nazis. I mean, that is totally out of bounds. Um, but like, don't you like that? Don't you think that like the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff, she's responding to that kind of stuff while unwittingly promoting Russian propaganda? It's like the way I think about it is this way: like Indiana Jones 4. So, the most hated Indiana Jones movie. The MacGuffin in that film was this alien skull that could talk to people around the world. And so the Soviet Union could like influence the mind of some housewife in Nebraska with this magical device. That it seems to be, I don't know if the filmmakers intended it this way, but it seems to be almost like a metaphor for the internet in the sense that Russian probably they don't have to spend a huge amount of money. They don't have to go and like build Russian cultural institutes in Paris and London and New York or whatever. They in fact can like push and nudge people through the internet into a position. They can take pre-existing biases and resentments and nudge them into a position in which they are absolutely spreading Russian propaganda. It is, in a way, the kind of simplest and like low key way of doing it, but it's also, in a way, the most sophisticated. And it works. It has worked. And to a degree, it worked on me. I mean, I was never a Russian asset in the way that like someone who is an RT employee is a clear Russian asset. And you see that from these people. They denied that Putin was going to invade for months, and then once he invades, they're like, "This is just about Donbass and the Nazis or whatever." And then they're like we'll steamroll Western Europe. They say that over the course of 3 weeks, the same people have said all of those opinions. Only Washington who wants war. Only this is only about Donbass and the Nazis, and then it's we're going to crush you. Those people are actual propagandists, and they're also midwits. Because one aspect of recruiting people is there's the concept of an unrecruitable asset. That is someone who thinks for himself or is too outrageous or too uncontrollable. You can't recruit him. You can't control him. Now, a midwit like Caleb Maupin, you can absolutely control. You can give him talking points and he will talk them. You can change them. He's too stupid to even recognize that it's logically incoherent. He will do it. That's a recruitable asset. An unrecruitable asset is someone who has passion and enthusiasm, intelligence, thumos, etc. And they are going to ultimately, they could turn against you. So, like,
Yeah,
they,
you know
all of
what?
these
Actually,
Marjorie Taylor Greene morons across America, this like lumpen bourgeoisie that they have attracted, they are recruitable assets, and they can be brainwashed. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say somebody on Twitter, this Kamil Giev guy, has been saying that Putin actually arrests the Russian ultranationalists when they try to organize pro-Russia, pro-war demonstrations. The theory being that Putin doesn't want those people to have any power because they could be a threat to him.
Right.
Putin also wants these kinds of midwits who will just do your bidding. He doesn't want an organic Russian nationalist scene that he doesn't control, which
No.
I think is quite interesting from that point of view.
Yeah. All right. Why don't you stay on? You can add some more. I've been enjoying your spaces, by the way. Brendan, do you
Appreciate
want
it.
to jump in? Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Okay.
Um, I've got a few things I want to talk about, but I think the first question is a question. Have any journalists even pretended to know that you've changed your position and that you've been going to war with the alt-right in the last 3 weeks? Have they even reached out to you?
Yes.
All right.
It's not now. I've seen a number of stories where they will basically quote stuff from 2017. So I said at some point, Putin is a great white leader of a great power, something like that, which of course is kind of a defensible statement on some level, But they've also quoted the Russia's our friend chant and stuff like that. They do not keep up with this. I have had some interesting follows, and I've had some interesting engagement on my my argument for a no-fly zone, which is basically creating it's basically creating East and West Germany and Ukraine, which I think, as I predict, that will be the ultimate solution. I've been having some deep conversations with two people about this issue, and I hope it does come to something.
All right. And then I shared a tweet in your space from Julia Yaffe. Actually, a few of them. One of them is a video where she lays out the truth that Syrians are less important to NATO than Ukrainians. And
Yeah.
then the one that you can see at the top, Channel 1 in Kremlin's news channel basically accuses Nancy Pelosi of Sieg heiling. So this is a propaganda that Marjorie Taylor Greene falls for.
Well, it's the Dems are the real racist. I mean, Putin is doing it.
Yeah, like Azov is the real Nazi army, right?
Yeah. Azov, look, as I said, I mean, it's in some ways a class thing. I'm not like gonna if they did engage in horrible
No, it's fine,
atrocities.
Rosalie. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, I'm not going to address them. The fact is, they're passionate. They're fighting a fight. Sometimes when you just gotta win. Like every football team has some like crazy guy in the defensive line. Like you kind of, whatever metaphor you want to use. You just you. It's not the time to start attacking people who are, you know, energized and passionate for your cause. And I would even go to, I think looking into Azov in terms of not necessarily all of their actions, but some of their statements about their conception of Maidan as a European awakening, their desire, heartfelt desire for a Maidan in Russia, I think those are actually powerful views. And yeah, I would say that.
And I just want to thank the late great John McCain for funding the Azov Battalion. Without them, who would defend the Donbass from the Eurasian horde? But also, you're talking about how you wanted to estimate the percentage of traders in
Yeah.
in the Traders Coalition and the Malcontents Online, and I was thinking maybe you could just do a 72-hour poll, pin it to your Twitter page. Do you support Russia or NATO? And then reply in the comments. I think that would be more accurate.
I think it would.
Well,
It might not be a scientific poll, but I
no.
definitely will do that. But yeah, look,
Well,
I've noticed this, and during doing the spaces in particular, I've noticed that there are a lot of people living in the Baltic countries, Master Sheikh being an example, but living in Western and Central Europe who really appreciate what I'm saying. And I've a lot of these people are anonymous, and they're educated and sophisticated, and they appreciate what I'm doing. But I've noticed this since 2018, where I don't get trolled by liberals very much, or even Antifa. The occasional punch video or something. Excuse me. But I get trolled by the alt-right. They hate this stuff. I get punch videos put forward by people who are dissident right. And, again, they've already expelled me from their movement, but they just want to keep hammering and hammering and hammering away. They want to keep expelling me. It's like, how many times can I be kicked out of this? And it's this weird thing where it's like, we don't care about you. You're a Fed. You're gay. You're whatever. You're a Russian asset. You're a CIA. Whatever the hell they're saying. But it's like they want to force me to go along with their memes, and it does not work. And it will never work.
Honestly, I was going to say, I'm honestly not quite sure why so many dissident right people are pro-Russia, and I'm getting a lot of that on Twitter as well.
Hey, Rich, sorry to interrupt. Hey, Rich, I just want to say...
you can't interrupt. Who is speaking?
Oh,
you can't
sorry,
interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess if Rocco made his point, I'll keep going.
Yeah, Rocco, you can finish your point. And then I actually will go to Cabo, but you can't interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't quite understand why so much of the dissident right has gone pro-Russia. It may just be kind of like reflexive contrarianism. Or it may be this kind of idea that Putin is a strong leader, and it would be nice if Western people had a strong leader who wasn't trying to sort of undermine them, and maybe that could be Putin. But that's sort of not who he is. He's a Russian mafioso who has like an oil fortune. Like he's not quote unquote our guy. And I mean it's a difficult one because the dissident right doesn't like the current Western power centers, and I think for good reasons. And so they see like somebody who's opposing that, and they're like, well, we want anything other than this, and this is anything, so we'll take it.
Yeah, I think that is a lot about it. But it's one thing to kind of say that on Twitter. Like, I've heard this joke for like a decade now. It's like, what would you do if Red Dawn happened? If like the Russians invaded, America, and it's like it'd be like we're liberated, like they'll be greeted as liberators, And it's fine to tell that joke, but when you start to believe it, and when that is your mindset in a geopolitical struggle, you are a traitor. You are not the person we need on the team. And you can't undermine a country that is engaged in a serious geopolitical confrontation. You cannot undermine it. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like, I was, for most of my 20s and 30s, I was effectively anti-war. I saw everything happening in the US and I was just like, this is awful. This is a wrong decision. It's for the wrong reasons, etc. But I'm not like it's just my instinct. I can't really I understand when something is under threat, and I understand when there's a struggle going on, and I live here, and I'm not a traitor, and I'm not a subversive, and it's just who I am at heart. I think with a lot of the malcontents, I don't think you can say that. They are people who do not demonstrate any sort of loyalty, and I think there is a deep nihilistic streak. And, I remember I was in this one chat, these people were like complaining about inflation and stuff like that. And then they were like, and then in the next message, they were like, well, isn't this great that Putin's, bombing Globo Homo? Ha 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 ha. And it's like, you're complaining about like, a bad but minor thing like paying more at the pump. What do you think is going to happen if NATO and the American sphere starts collapsing? You think you're going to be paying more at the pump? You think you might have some financial difficulties if that's how? I mean, I just see these people. It's just like they've lost touch with reality. They live in an internet realm.
And you're up against like a couple of bad actors, Richard. Nick Fuentes being the most obvious. He's like seriously the most dangerous person in this country besides Trump, when he has Congress members and my lieutenant governor, Janice McGeachin, covering for him and pretending not to know him when they're taking selfies with him and attending his AFPAC.
Yeah.
And the other one, I don't know like how big this crowd is, but Michael Paynovich's National Justice Party. I was reading about a guy named Charles Bowsman, or I think his name is.
Charles
In
Bowsman.
2014, he was an immigrant or an expatriate in Russia and launched Russia Insider, like a website that's pro-Kremlin. And this guy owns a barn in Lancaster Township, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And that barn was the site for the inaugural opening ceremony of the National Justice Party on August 15th, 2020.
Yeah, Charles Bowsman's a Russian agent, or he wants to be one. It's one of those two, because there's been evidence that he's sought out support from oligarchs and so on. I've met Charles Bowsman on a number of occasions. I've rubbed shoulders with people who were absolutely Russian agents and who cheered me on, but at the end of the day, never really saw me as what they wanted. And I know this is a bit self-serving or puffing up, but I think they kind of realized who I am. I'm not going to dance to their tune, and I am not going to dedicate my energies towards, the wishes of a foreign power. But yeah, Charles Bowsman is actually absolutely a bad actor. He is, from what I understand, he fled the United States after January 6th, but he was pumping all of that stuff up. He was writing these posts about how after January 6th, the American people have awoken and they want the kind of Russian orthodoxy and traditionalism and will never go back. And he was just saying all of this stuff. All that means is that America is at the worst kind of weakened and chaotic, and so NATO is going to collapse. Or you could even say that he's saying that they're now pro-Russia, and that anything can be done. Russia can expand its sphere, Russia can consolidate, etc. It's all bad, and it's all traitorous. Again, Manuel Oxenreider, I did half a dozen podcasts with him. He was engaged in terrorism in Ukraine. He's now dead under mysterious circumstances. He died in Moscow, by the way. He's my age. He died of a heart attack. Make of that what you will. Kind of sounds like I was rubbing shoulders with traitors. Manuel Oxenreider was a German citizen, and he absolutely betrayed his country. He was a Russian asset.
And
Yeah,
it is
go
kind
ahead, and then I'll move on to some other people.
one thing about NATO that I think maybe would make them more aggressive or tougher, that I think they should do, is they keep saying they don't want to play Putin's game because he has nukes and it's so scary. He has the most nukes. Well, I've heard so many different theories on how to create peace or to appease him or to like make some sort of deal. I don't think he's that type of person, but if I wasn't had any like influence, I would simply have NATO do what Putin does. And I don't know if they can legally do this, but if Putin just wants to incrementally annex Ukraine, then NATO should incrementally protect Ukraine. So instead of protecting all of Ukraine, they should just take the western third and announce that it's a NATO. And then they send in more weapons to protect the middle half. And then once the Russians have been kicked out, they just take over the middle half, and NATO says now the middle half of Ukraine is in our space. And then they just keep sending in weapons and pushing the Russians back and incrementally taking Ukraine into NATO. I think that's one way to actually win.
I absolutely agree. I mean, that was basically what I was suggesting with the type of no-fly zone. It's saying that, no more. We are declaring a line here, and we are going to just declare this area as a kind of protectorate, a kind of West Germany, if you will. And at the very least, you could end up with a kind of stalemate, and so we wouldn't have an insurgency. I mean, I've heard the criticism of some conservatives, and I don't think it's given in bad faith, I think it is given in bad faith, but that doesn't mean it's entirely wrong. And what they're saying is like, why are we just giving more ammunition to Ukraine? They're going to lose a little bit later, and more people are going to die. I think that's actually a legitimate point. And the metaphor or the slogan or that I was using in that tweet thread, it's like in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, we are in for a penny in this. We are in for much more than a penny already. Like, we can't just say, oh, this is like Yemen and no one gives a shit, So some leftist malcontent will whine about it, but then next week everyone will forget it and it's over. This is something that has clearly captured the imagination of the globe or the Western world, which is a kind of hive mind. And this is on the front page of every newspaper going forward for the next 5 years. So it's like, we can't just say, wow, we might as well just throw our hands up on this one, and move on. Something has to be done. So might as well, if we're already supplying billions of dollars of aid and weaponry and so on, we're talking about MiGs, why don't we just say, look, Putin, we don't want to be nuked by you. Of course not. You also don't want to be nuked by us. This is the logic of it, mutual deterrence. And so, we'll say, look, no more. You're not going further. This part of Ukraine is going to be a protectorate. There might be a conventional exchange on the lines of this. We understand that, but we also are going to be in communication with you to prevent any kind of nuclear exchange. But we're not going to talk anymore about Ukraine choosing its own destiny. Its own destiny has been chosen. And the East is now part of the Russian destiny, and the West is part of NATO and European destiny. That is a fact, and we are going to defend that line. I just think that is a sane way of dealing with this matter.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think, Richard, it's probably going to end up like that. But I think the reason they're not just kind of going in with the NATO tanks right now is that Putin's army actually sucks so badly that if we went in and we gave him like a little push, his shit would just collapse, which would mean that he would then be incentivized to use tactical nukes, and we don't want to put him in that position. So I suspect that what they're doing is they just want to give the Ukrainians enough material, enough equipment that Putin's in a really shitty situation. Biden's just been on the phone to the Chinese to stop them from intervening. And what Putin will have to do is he'll have to basically do a deal with the Ukrainians, I think, now, based on how badly his military is doing. And then basically he'll get some stuff. He'll get Crimea. He'll get Donbass. Maybe he'll get a bit more as well. And the rest will be I think what they're gunning for is that it's going to be allowed to join the EU but not allowed to join NATO.
Right.
And that'll be seen as good enough. That'll be like the buffer state. So I mean, I suspect the adults in the room are trying to handle this properly. Whether they're going to get it right is another question. But I mean, you have to be aware that Putin's conventional shit is so bad that actually makes him more dangerous.
Right. Now, what you said is extremely reasonable, but isn't Putin in for more than a pound already? It's like in for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound, in for everything. Everything or nothing.
I mean, I think the theory might be that if we give him Crimea, Donbass, guarantee of no NATO membership, he can then go to the Russian people and sell that as a victory because he's just lost like 20,000 men. Right. He needs something to go home with so that he doesn't get assassinated or have a coup against him, right? So they need to give him something.
Wait, we don't need to give him something if that will launch a coup or assassinate.
Well, no, I mean we need to because otherwise he fucking gets the nukes out, right? Because if his alternatives are,
but we have nuclear weapons.
We have the nuke. We have the submarines. He doesn't get to use tactical nukes just because he loses a war. We lost in Afghanistan. Biden pulled out. We didn't nuke Afghanistan because the Taliban took it over.
Right, but I mean, if Putin personally is in a situation where if he goes home,
he cannot handle losing.
Let Rocco finish.
Sorry.
Right. I mean, the point is, if he personally is in a situation where he's lost so badly that when he goes home, they are literally going to push him off a balcony, then his personal cost of using the nukes becomes zero, and so he then just gambles. He becomes very reckless. So we don't want that. We want to give him enough that it's an off ramp, right? It's an off ramp. That's what they mean by an off ramp. You give the opponent enough that they have just that little something to go home with, so that he doesn't want to actually start getting the nukes out.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're being totally reasonable here, Rocco. All I'm saying is, that off ramp. This sounds like something that would have been a really sane and foresighted deal, like in 2020. If I were Secretary of State under some amazing situation, I would have been listening to Mearsheimer and being like, let's make a deal here. So Ukraine, you get Crimea, we've forgotten about that. Donbass becomes just part of the Russian Federation. And basically we'll have a compromise where Ukraine's in the EU but not in NATO. So it's a kind of buffer state, but there's kind of an assumption here that if you start encroaching on Ukraine, that NATO's gonna, get its back up.
But I think that's kind of
totally fine in 2020. But very wise. No one dies. But
I think they tried to do that.
He's in for he has put his fucking chips at the middle of the table.
I would like to point out something. So is it Rocco or Rocco?
Rocco.
Okay. You said we don't want him using a tactical nuke, and I don't want him using that. But let's say he does. You don't seem to think that would just get him assassinated. Also, maybe his generals would kill him if he dropped a nuke. Maybe if he ordered them to, they would get rid of him. And I noticed he's already paranoid. He went next to them at the table. He's sitting 40 feet away from them, and also all those fuel shortages and all of those troop positions being leaked and bombed in Ukraine. I don't think that's all incompetence. Those generals, I don't think all of them are incompetent. I think it might be sabotage. And Putin is arresting people. He's paranoid that he's being sabotaged by his own administration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right there, but I think probably the kind of European and American leaders are like, well, we could push him and see which way it goes, and there's maybe a 50-50 that he actually does get taken down by his own people, or maybe he does actually escalate, and we don't want to go there. We just don't like that gamble. But what I was going to say before, to Richard's point, is why didn't we do this in 2020 or 2021? And I think, again, I'm not an expert in this, but I think they basically did, And Putin and his guys rejected it because they were like, "No, Russia's strong. Our military's strong. We're gonna take the whole of Ukraine because we've got this
Well, you're
amazing."
making my argument for me then.
Yeah, but then actually his army sucked, and the theory here is that Putin didn't actually realize how badly his own army sucked.
Well, why
Now,
reward him for sucking?
but now that he realizes how badly his own guys suck, now he'll take the deal, right? Because he's tried it. He's kind of, he's tried to be the big strong man, and his stuff sucks. And now he's going to be like, okay, I'll take Crimea and Donbass, and we can just.
Well, you got to look at it like Ukraine is Heather Heyer, and Putin is James Alex Fields, just driving his car into that.
Okay. Glad we got rid of that guy. Okay. Tasnim Akunje. You've got the floor. We've had a good discussion on this. I think we're kind of. I think we could, if we're going to discuss it further, we'd probably be making the same points. Tasnim Akunje. You got to unmute your mic, or I'm going to move on. All right. I'm sorry, buddy. Zahid Khan.
Thank you so much. Hello to everybody on my side. I think the Russia has made a very huge mistake to attack the innocent Ukrainian people, and the NATO is stuck there. They promised before Russian attacks America and the NATO. They told Russia, if you attack Ukraine, you'll face bad consequences. But when they attacked, then NATO didn't took action against Russia to fight with Russia. If that was occurred in a very strong way, Russia was not able to fight with the whole NATO. But if we look at the if we leave the hypocrisy and we see to the whole world, that what is happening in the whole world. Look, if Russia killed innocent civilian, it is bad. But if Israeli kill innocent Palestinian, that is good. If Russia kills innocent civilians in Ukraine, it is bad. If America was killing innocent civilians in Afghanistan for the last 20 years, it was good. If America killed millions of civilians, children, including women in Iraq, that was good. America and NATO killed millions of innocents in Libya, in Syria, in Lebanon.
Well, that's just not true. That's just not true. America didn't kill millions of civilians in Libya. It was maybe a few hundred or a few thousand or something.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand the point you're making, and I don't doubt that there is a great deal of hypocrisy. But to go back to like Julia Yaffe's point that was mentioned by Brandon earlier, I mean, NATO its origins are in protecting Western and Central Europe. That's what it is, and for better and for worse, non-European people dying on the other side of the globe is not going to have the visceral impact on the hearts and minds of Europeans as Ukrainians dying. And this is just an aspect of human nature, and it's also an aspect of the NATO alliance itself. And so, I mean, I get it, and I understand why people find that that's hypocritical or white supremacist or whatever, but it is what it is.
But I mean, NATO actually wasn't in Iraq, right? Iraq was not a NATO operation, and Afghanistan, that also wasn't a NATO. Was Afghanistan a NATO operation? I forget.
Well, I mean, no. The answer is no, but like to the degree that it was America's operation, it was. But so, I mean, I understand. I mean, it's reasonable to confuse NATO and the United States. I think less so now, though. I think there is. I mean, remember when NATO was created in 1949, Germany was like pleading for help. And in 2022, Germany's rearming. So we're just in a different situation now, and there are multiple nuclear powers within NATO, France and Britain. So it's a different situation. I'm not gonna. I get the whole hypocrisy thing, but I think there are kind of limits to that way of thinking. Cabo Smiley, you've got the floor. Can I unmute your mic?
So yeah, thank you for letting me have the floor. My name is
Sure.
Jordan. I have a baseball game tomorrow, but really, I just want to say before I go quickly, I think what we need to do is let people watch Servant of the People. I think they're having it on Netflix, so I think maybe that way you could change some hearts and minds of the American people, of those the Fuentes types and those guys, who are unvaccinated, and it's really it's really disturbing to see. So I think we could get people to watch that and not go into this whole pro Russia route. I think maybe we
Okay.
could change some minds here.
Thank you. All right. Samuel M. Rims. You've got the floor. Samuel. All right. You got to speak up, guys, or I move on. Obvious Sock Puppet, you've got the floor.
Yeah, g'day, Richard. G'day, Brandon. Rocco, how are you? You've had some really good spaces after the last week or so, Richard. It's been entertaining to listen to and informative. But I think it was the previous space where you were mentioning, putting the Russia thing aside, the degree to which that America relies upon China in the current economic conditions and geopolitical. And you mentioned that if China decided to, Walmart would be bare, and that would be probably one thing I do like I know about Americans is they do like their Walmart. So
take away our Slurpees and Big Macs and discounted iPhones. I mean, we'll lose our minds. Yes.
I wonder where they make the little electronic scooters. I'm sure they're made in China too. They're entertaining. But
you've never been to America, I presume. You live in Australia.
Yeah, I have.
I mean, oh, you have. Okay. Well, I will tell you that literally everyone in America is over 400 pounds, and diabetes. Actually, I think we're at a level of 95% type 2 diabetes. And the average IQ is hovering around 65 at this point. So just to let you know, I mean, that's a fair and accurate representation of Americans.
I mean, a quote from Batman came into my head, victory has defeated you.
Exactly. Without those electronic scooters, we literally could not move or even get out of bed. I mean, we have a elaborate system of cranes.
It's not a joke. It's not a joke, is it?
It's not I'm being totally accurate. So every American who, again, the average weight is well over 400 pounds, no American can get out of bed or a shower without an elaborate electronic crane system. And all of those are made in China.
Yeah.
That's
quite sad.
We've got to take all of this into consideration. These are geopolitical factors that most people don't talk about.
But my overarching point was that since the early 70s, we're a roundabout way of getting there, but that's good. You're informing the audience, Richard, of the conditions in America. No, it's good. But since the early 70s, the objective of America has been to split Russia and China to avoid them being what they were in the 1950s, conjoined powers. Do you think America is up to taking on Russia and China at the same time? I mean, you kind of have to pick out one to be the main geopolitical rival in this century. Otherwise, if the two get together, I have to say, I think it's over for the Atlantis' power. Like sea power is what's been propelling Great Britain, of course, and America since the 18th century. And I think if that were to happen, we're in deep shit.
I get it. And I've said this also, like the Chimerica arrangement. Now, granted, Chimerica in 2022 isn't Chimerica in like 1998 or even like 2007 when the iPhone came out. Is that kind of a turning point? Like things have changed, and China does want to go in a different direction. I think China does want a big middle class, but still, you can't just like unwind that in a matter of weeks or something. And I have seen a few things. Like I've seen a few. I think Brendan tweeted one out last night. Like there are a few Chinese officials who aren't exactly endorsing the invasion, but they're basically just playing the hypocrisy game. Like, who are you to criticize Putin when you invaded Iraq? Blah, blah, blah. So there is some, there's some problems there. India's buying Russian oil, and all these like Russia-philic people are like, oh, we're going to, it sounds like Khrushchev at the kitchen speech with Nixon. It's like, we will bury you. Like the BRICS and China, Russia, we'll give oil to Russia, China, we'll all be rich. And like you Americans, you're past your prime. Okay. I'm like, I don't buy into any of that, but is there kind of more than one kernel of truth? Like, are they kind of getting at something? I think the answer is yes.
In real terms,
I think we should just talk about it because I don't have a full solution to it. I mean, I'm sure that Biden certainly does not want China supporting Russia in Ukraine. And he wants to kind of keep everything easy with regarding Taiwan. But I'm not sure we have any answers, but we can actually look to history. Like in the 50s, Mao visited Moscow and they were just like bros, like Stalin and Mao, or like you got the East, I got the West, like we're in this together, team. And then again, 25 years later, Mao is talking to Nixon and telling him how I like right wingers.
So from my understanding, the reason for the Sino-Soviet split was that the USSR, after they got rid of Beria, they adopted peaceful coexistence with the West, and that's what Mao didn't want. He wanted to take the fight to the West. So it was even a weird situation that Chimerica even happened to begin with.
Yes, no question. Even Beria is actually a little bit questionable. There's interesting documents revealed that Beria was willing for Germany to be unified and neutralized, and he called it an Austrian solution. So it would have effectively been part of the West, but would be neutralized, not part of NATO, and demilitarized. And Konrad Adenauer rebuffed him. So Konrad Adenauer, for better and for worse, left a third of his countrymen behind the Iron Curtain. But it's all very complicated, and I've been honest enough to say that I don't have an answer to these questions. I'm like, but, I don't.
Would you agree that the roost has been flown in regards to Russia being a potential ally against China now? It's
that's over. Yeah, that's gone.
It's finished. It's finished.
For the next, this neo-Cold War is going to last for 30 years at least.
Right. No, it's all good. Thanks for your answer, and
sure.
Keep those faces up. It's really good. It's really entertaining, and it's far better than most of the podcasts in this sphere. So yeah, good job.
I appreciate it. Guy or G. Guy or
Richard.
G. You have Putin G. Yes.
How are you?
I'm well. How about you?
I'm good. I'm from Africa, South Africa to be specific. I normally come here and listen to your conversation, but I don't normally come and be a speaker, But there's something that you just touched there, and I felt so provoked by the statement that you make. Are you telling me that the invasion in other countries doesn't affect you because it's not in Europe? Is it the statement that I heard it correctly?
Yes.
So, which means if the invasion is happening in Africa, that when a US is invading countries like your Mali, your Niger, your Angola, and all that, so it doesn't affect you. Is it what you were saying?
Yes,
I wanted to be specific about. So, how do you then expect an African person to sympathize with Ukraine if you don't see any value or the repercussion that get imposed to African people when they're invaded by USA, and you don't see anything wrong with that, or it doesn't affect you, and you expect African people to sympathize with you, Ukraine?
I don't expect you to sympathize with Ukraine or me.
Or so, which means now, now it makes sense. No, I wanted to the clarity to get the clarity on that. So, can I just say something also in passing? So before I leave, I
Sure.
wanted to for you guys maybe also to discuss the issue of this in Hague Invasion Act ne? That that states that America has the power, or they are given the power to say if any president or any personnel of the Allied, if he's arrested or detained by ICC, International Criminal Court, they have the power to invade the Hague. Have you ever thought about that too? Also to say, so in a sense, the USA is given the license to invade in each and every country, because then we know that they are not going to be held accountable, because the Hague Invasion Act allows them to do that. Have you ever
I have an answer for
also,
that.
okay?
The Hague, the ICJ, like International Criminal Court, does not apply to the powers of the UN or veto powers. So whatever the Hague has to say does not apply to any of the big five in the Security Council. So there's no enforcement for that, legally speaking. The Security Council can can they don't like they can overrule the ICJ.
Yeah, but they sit on the Security Council that they are not even allowed to. I mean, they are not allowed to be subjected to that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. It's in the charter. Like, if the ICJ like makes a motion against Russia or China or whatever, they would just veto, and the Security Council is essentially the supreme body of the UN. That's how it was set up in 1946. So, this ICJ might make small motions and legal, statements in favor of Ukraine, but they will never ever be able to enforce any resolution against any of the big five, which is the five Security Council members.
This is the just outcome of the Second World War.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That we're still living with. I mean, keep in mind, in America, when I was growing up, we learned about D-Day, and our boys stormed the beaches of Normandy. That was just D-Day. I mean, obviously these things are important, but they pale in comparison to the Eastern Front and what the Red Army accomplished, brutally accomplished. I mean, it is just a reality that Yalta was going to happen in the way that it did, and that effectively the Second World War outcome was going to be giving away most of Eastern Europe, because the Russians did the fighting and dying. And
there's a funny thing too.
Physical reality. I mean,
when the UN was being founded, a lot of the smaller countries were against the veto powers. And I think it was one of the big American generals. I can't remember his name exactly right now, but he literally went on a podium and he took the UN Charter and he ripped it in front of all the other countries and said, if you guys don't accept the veto powers, you can not accept it, but then there will be no UN. So the veto, and that was an American general, politician or general at the time. So the veto powers is essentially what the big five are, the rulers of the world at our current age. So there's nothing the ICJ can do against any of them. There's just no enforcement, and they can veto. So,
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can obviously hold, like, elected officials accountable in a U.S. court system. But, like, one of the big things we saw even with impeachment was Mueller was like, well, this is all very ambiguous, but at the end of the day, like, you can't just convict the president of a crime while he's the president. Like you can't go to court, a U.S. court, and like overturn the U.S. government. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Like
that's
these are
even
pretty
more
fundamental.
you see,
applicable in the
when
ICJ.
I was bringing this to your attention, guys, it was the fact that we are discussing on Russia is doing to Ukraine, which is Russia is also has the veto power. So now it's the same thing that normally happened to America. It's the same thing that you're endorsing here. So I don't see any sense for us, if especially me as a black person from Africa, having any discussion on that, because it become more problematic when I know that we don't have any say on anything because we don't have veto power as South Africa. So
Yeah, but it's
my
not just Africa. All, like, most countries in the world don't have veto power. Like,
Yeah.
just 5 of them do.
Yeah, I get that. Remember when I said that I normally I don't become a speaker most of the time. I just listen. But what provoked me was the statement that Richard made, and which is now confirming, because I wanted to be certain whether it's what he's implying. So, but now it makes sense why most of the things that are happening during the invasion, how most of the black people were treated. I understand now why this is like this, what it is at the moment. So
Yeah.
no, I get you, and I don't expect you to sympathize with black people who have been treated bad in that side, and whatever the invasion that happening in Africa. I just wanted to get the clarity on that. No, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I wanted to say something, Richard. I just jump in to answer his
you can
question.
stay on. You can stay on. I'm gonna move on to some other questions. So, Burn Coal 2. You have the floor. Burn Coal 2. All right. Last chance. Yeah, you can jump in now, Radar.
All right. Thanks for the floor, first of all. I wanted to push back on a few things I heard from Brendan, from Rocco, and a few other people. I think there's a little bit of in the West of drinking your own Kool-Aid kind of thing. Like, it seems like BBC takes their sources from CNN, that takes their sources from MSNBC, who talked to a guy in Lviv that worked for 12 years in the West, and he speaks English and translates some Telegram channels to whoever. The truth of the matter is, I'm gonna explain what I'm doing to get like sort of like a more balanced view. There's one YouTube channel that is by a guy named just let me get his name here. There's both Yuri Gherkin and Yuri Podolyaka. Yuri Gherkin was an FSB officer who actually organized the coups in Eastern Ukraine back in 2014. He's very prolific on Russia's social media. And Yuri Polyaka, he's a Russian, I think he's a sort of a military man who resides in Crimea, and he's making like 3 videos a day talking about the front and the advancements in the front. The problem is he speaks Russian. So the way I don't speak Russian, but I've been consuming that information because YouTube has like auto subtitles. So it's not perfect, but you can kind of understand what he's saying, and he shows the maps of the front. So there's a huge mismatch. I saw somebody say that like Vladimir Putin's in a bunker. He was literally in a meeting in the Kremlin yesterday, and in a huge stadium today. Like, it doesn't make sense, And I think there's a lot of projection and wishful thinking from the West in thinking that, oh, the Russian army is crumbling, and etc. etc. The goal of the Russian army right now, and I'm not shilling for them, just taking like realistically, is to defeat the Ukrainians militarily. The bulk of the Ukrainian army, the most trained troops, about 40,000 of them or 60,000 are in the Donbass front. So if you notice, the Donbass front hasn't moved much, and that's essentially where they're fighting the most. And what I'm trying to say is that there should be some more of a critical thinking about the information that's being given by the Western press.
Yeah, I actually tend to agree with that point. I mean, that's why I was pushing back a bit on Roku. Like, I don't I hear this as well. Like when I read the New York Times or listen to some people, where it almost seems like everything's going wrong for Russia and Ukraine could
Yes,
win this thing.
exactly.
It
It's like they're
it's
about to crumble,
Yeah.
every day
When
now.
I hear that, even if it's true, I think it's good to be a little skeptical of that. Like when I hear that, I'm like, ah. So all of this remains to be seen. I mean, within 3 weeks, the U.S. had taken Baghdad, but
But
this is a
it's a
different
different.
situation. Ukraine has
Yeah,
a
but
lot of friends. Iraq has no
no,
friends.
exactly.
Yeah,
And also it's a high IQ country.
yeah,
It has been like supplied and trained by NATO for 8 years. It's arguably the second biggest or strongest army in Europe, if not, probably similar to the French, but less equipped, at least in
yeah.
training. So like, what I suggest everybody to try to consume some of the Russian media coming out. Even if you look at YouTube videos with the auto subtitles, you see like and there's like what I've noticed, at least from the Russian YouTubers and whatnot, it seems like they're trying to get to a more realistic and pragmatic approach to the truth, because I hear them talk about their failures way more bluntly than the West talks about Ukraine's failures, because I
Okay.
don't believe there's 15,000 Russians dead, and Ukraine just lost 1,000 of them. It's like each Ukrainian killed 150 Russians, something like this nature.
Right.
I just suggest that all of you kind of do that. The auto subtitles on YouTube channels like really does work.
Yeah,
So it's a
that's
good
fair
way to
enough.
consume
Yeah,
information.
that's fair enough.
He mentioned me, so I would respond to Radar also.
Okay, sure.
I understand that the Western media in Ukraine exaggerate, but their sources are from U.S. intelligence. No, I don't believe 15,000 Russians are dead, but when I read reports citing U.S. sources, the Department of Defense says about 6,000 to 8,000 Russians are dead, and they're in a stalemate. No major cities have been taken over; they're under siege. But the longer this drags on, the more they fortify the city, the more they power up the territorial defense troops.
They also run out of supplies. So I mean, and I think the U.S. intelligence doesn't have like that clear of a view on the ground as much as they would. Like they have satellite images, they might have informants, but it's not that perfect. They pulled out all of their people before the invasion,
This is all
rightfully
fair.
so. So
I think both sides of this question are fair. I mean, I've expressed myself like I try to consume this and that and try to get a little both sides. But I think it's just best to like say, like, if you see a source that's really clearly pro-Russian, you kind of say, okay, that's like the worst case scenario for NATO. And then when you read the New York Times, you can say, all right, well, that's kind of the worst case scenario for Russia. And then somewhere in between there. But this is all fair. I think let me let someone else speak, because I kind of agree with both sides on this question. Libertarian Jimrat, you can jump in.
All right. It's librarian Jim Rat, but it's fine. Everybody makes the mistake. Yeah, I kind of hate libertarians. So
yeah, I would never accuse you of being a libertarian. I apologize.
Thank you
immensely.
Thank you. So there was a question and a speculation earlier brought up partially by Rocco and I suppose partially by yourself about like the virtue seen in Russia's war within the dissident right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be a little bit esoteric, but consider this a good faith presentation of the position.
Okay.
So everybody understands that Russia does not have the dissident rights interests in mind. And it never really was about that. It was, so this is a war between old, like conventional models of war, kinetic war, and international globalist economic warfare. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, The Pentagon's New Map.
I think I've heard of that. I've not read of it. Yeah, that rings a bell, but I've not read it.
It's an exceptional piece of literature that talks about how essentially the way that the modern style of warfare is conducted is that the U.S. acting as like a strong arm of the World Economic Forum or whatever you want to call it, goes into nations, destroys infrastructure, inserts itself into key points of economic infrastructure, and then uses that as leverage to blackmail entire nations into adopting policies. And essentially, like, this is like, in a sort of esoteric sense, this is Russia declaring war on Ukraine is literally a revolt against the modern world. Like it's kind of like based like in that respect, and like in also it's like a sort of proof of concept in saying like that traditional warfare can still actually do something against the new way that warfare is conducted. Because like a lot of people don't understand that the Cold War never ended. What it did was evolved to avoid classification as warfare. Much like an autoimmune virus avoids classification within a body by the immune system in order to take down the host. And what you see is that cancellation as a phenomenon is like a microcosm of what this global international clique does to nations, entire nations, whether it's Iceland over the whole circumcision ordeal. But now it's Russia, and now it's Russia's turn. And if Russia is able to actually capture Ukraine in an act of what is almost literally one for one, Lebensraum, exceptionally based, like it's not even a matter of Russia being the good or bad guys. Like we have no stake in this. Like we don't give a shit. Like honestly, it's more of like it's like a white pill. It's saying like if you are strong enough, you can win against the global homo, and it's a huge like inspiration in that respect.
Okay. Okay. This is an interesting presentation. It resonates a lot with what I've seen on Alexander Dugin's Telegram channel. So I guess you're in good company or bad company, maybe. But don't you feel like you're superimposing metaphors onto something that is kind of simpler, in the sense that like globo homo is also going to be transformed, has been already transformed by this conflict, in the sense that over the course of most of my life, since I was about 10, I have lived in an era of true globalism, the end of history, or as you said, like, kinetic conflicts become like economic policies and the debt schemes and the IMF and so on. And that too has actually come to an end. That in confronting Russia, the West too is kind of returning to a Lebensraum concept, sphere of influence, in the sense that it no longer, like, you could totally reasonably say 10 years ago, let's go before Maidan of 2014. Like if I visited Russia in 2013, you could reasonably say like, hey, look, it's all kind of one world, right? You go into Moscow, you can go into H&M and buy a suit for $100. You can go buy a Rolex. You can go get a Rolls Royce if you have the cash. You can go to a fancy restaurant that's, a lot like, if not identical to, a fancy restaurant in Paris or San Francisco. Now you kind of can't say that. And so just as Russia is kind of like asserting itself and its world, the West too is going to kind of re-understand itself as a like sphere of influence, and as something that's limited, and not just kind of like infinite and planetary, but actually limited. And this is kind of what I was talking about, where I do stand behind this prediction. I think the wokeness stuff has peaked. I also think right-wing populism has peaked, and they are going down. I think all of that stuff is going to be dialed back. And these are just little anecdotes, but like Biden took his pronouns out of his Twitter profile. Now, make of that what you will. Biden, in a State of the Union address, said, let's fund the police and not defund them. Make of that what you will. Maybe it's just rhetoric, maybe it's nothing. But you can't be this like internally at war with yourself, this divisive, if you are going to fight in a bifurcated world. And so just as the East is transforming, as you describe it, the West is going to have to transform too. And so, I mean, I think a lot of you guys might need to understand something about me. Like, I think that conflict is natural to the world. I think that peace is unnatural and, in fact, unhealthy. I think conflict and the threat of annihilation gives life meaning and grounds us. It is necessary. I relish our reintroduction into the 20th century and the fact that there is a global enemy and that we're going to start fearing nuclear apocalypse. I relish that because that, in a way, grounds it. You can only have freedom within limits, and limits grant you freedom. You only have an identity if there are boundaries and territory. And so this kind of thing, you can say it's like, you know, in all, I do think that you're actually acting in good faith and you're not just like calling me a fed or whatever. I think you offered a good faith presentation of that view, but like I would counter that back to you and say that like we live in the West and the West is going to be equally transformed by this struggle. And that's a good thing. Struggle is good. Conflict is good. Death, the fear of death is good. It allows you to understand life.
So, you're all right if I respond to that?
Sure.
So at face value, I agree with the fundamental premise, like, you know, conflict, it makes life what it is, so to speak. Like it helps contextualize meaning, and it also brings out the best in people. It allows you to select for virtuous qualities and things like
yes.
that. But there is another dimension to this as well. And being part of the far right, it is an it's an ideology driven by a survival instinct, by a sort of neuroticism. And so we're always looking at threat vectors. And what I see is that the current trajectory of the economy right now, there's actually been like a rapid push for acceleration into this great reset thing. And I say thing just as a...
What is the great reset? I hear this. What is it?
So I'll give an abridged version, just because like I'm not even sure I'm qualified to give the fullest extent of the processes that they want to go through. But in general, the idea is that we will switch from a society in which people own things to a society in which people will temporarily use things and they won't actually have essentially property rights. What I see, and this was put out by the World Economic Forum a while ago, and they had to like pull that shit down because everybody started paying it. It was almost a happening, so to speak. But what's going on right now? And I say right now, but it's been over the course of the entire Biden presidency, was layers of these subtle yet intentionally destructive, like malignant policies that from the outside view might look like incompetence, but they're almost like targeted strikes on what allows the supply chain to function. Like I only found out about this through listening, like eavesdropping on a conversation my boss was having with somebody else, where they changed the rules for like what the processes for taking freight off from the ships, where they had to take the shipping containers, which added effectively like $5,000 per container to like the cost of transporting goods like for imports. And then they almost arbitrarily changed the rules for like for truckers in the US, where and it might just be at a state level. I don't remember because I didn't hear the full conversation. But in essence, it was something crazy. Like you had to have an like an electric truck within a certain amount of years, and they don't even exist yet. And that you had to buy a new truck every so many years, which they cost like $500,000 or something fucking insane. Like, sorry, I didn't mean to swear, but something insane like that. And what this does is, one, well, it disincentivizes people to participate in the supply chain, like in basic fundamental, jobs that you need for society to function. But also, you see this in areas where there are policies being put out to incentivize crime, like where they drop down certain crimes to misdemeanors that cops basically don't even enforce. And obviously, this is in isolated areas. And then you see this develop further and further. And when when they shut down the pipeline, like Biden shut that shit down, and then we went into the sanctioned conflict with Russia. That it's almost like too like it's like plausible deniability, or no, the word is suspension of disbelief. Like there's no sustaining of the suspension of disbelief. It almost seems like it was anticipated and acted upon intentionally.
Well, why? I don't understand what you're arguing, though. I mean, it's like,
sorry. I'm just building the preface.
I get the idea that you'll own nothing and you'll rent everything, and that the digital economy has actually been pushing towards that for a while. You know, like if you live in a big city, why own a car unless you're really rich? You know, and like you have Netflix, why would you have a DVD collection, etc. I mean, I get that, and I think that's like a aspect of just the digital economy in general, and it's not necessarily like the worst thing, to be honest.
Okay.
But I don't know. Like, I don't think that this is all a big puppet show that we're seeing. The Biden administration was kind of predicting an invasion, and they were correct about that. But I think if anything, there's going to be calls for like renewed energy independence, and I think Germany is going to start, after Merkel, they're going to return to nuclear power. It just seems like they will be forced to by economic necessity of a bifurcated world. But I don't think the globalists like this. I mean, I don't think they want a new Cold War. I mean, they want the 30 years back where everything was the same and everything was globalist. And Putin, God bless him, has kind of like dragged us back into the 20th century where there is a bifurcated world. And so we're going to be more energy dependent. The liberals are going to be pressing this. The liberals, when I was a child, you had a lot of nationalism among liberals. They were like, union operated, made in America, buy a Chevy truck and not something in Japan, or don't buy from sweatshop. I think this is going to return. And I think all this populist garbage of Trump and all that kind of stuff, it's just irrelevant at this point. It does not speak to anyone outside of lunatics and right-wing Twitter, enthusiasts. And, I think that's where we're returning, because, it's like, thank God in a way for that Putin did this, because he's going to kind of like define realms. And yeah, I think the West is going to be more kind of, gay, hyper progressive or whatever. But like, it's going to have to reassess itself due to this conflict. And that is a good thing.
So, as a sort of rebuttal of sorts, you brought up about how you think that liberals are going to become nationalistic again.
Yeah.
I don't see it, man. The way we've been seeing the development of, because they're not nationalistic. They have the so there's this phenomena that I've noticed.
Look, Trump is going nowhere, and AOC is also going nowhere. And people.
I'm not talking about pundits.
Well, no. Well, those are politicians. Like I think, yeah.
I'm talking about normies, man. I'm talking about like regular people.
Okay. You think regular people are insane leftist? I mean, I don't.
No. I'm saying that regular people, and this is something that I've come, like, it's taken me a long time to come to this sort of realization. And I'll colloquially refer to them as normies for the sake of just saying that instead of normative people, because that's just clunky.
Yeah, sure.
Normies, a lot of them don't actually like give a shit about politics. They adopt political positions off of social and economic convenience. and whoever whatever the dominant framework in the room is, they're going to adopt it. Like, and in this case, it's usually going to be whatever the major narrative is, whatever the news outlets are putting out there. But as a result of this, you have a population of people that can, on the flip of a dime, can become fun, almost like sadistic. Like you see this a lot with the Redditors, but obviously they're not normies, so to speak. Right. Redditors are a different species almost, and it's kind of weird.
They're librarians.
Hey, now I've never been on Reddit. Don't accuse me of that. I'm a purist. All right, Facebook only. All right. But I think you're going to see a sort of manufactured war hawk culture come in, but not in like a nationalistic way. The Russians here are a sort of a homunculus, so to speak, something to project all of the sins of their evil right wingers onto, something that they can use as almost like practice for their rhetoric, for their borderline sadistic tendencies. You're going to see a further amplification of this like negative trust society that we're seeing, where family members will turn on each other for social clout, not even for material self-interest, making it fundamentally worse than zero trust society. And I think you're going to see like an acceleration of intergroup violence, intergroup. And I don't mean this like demographically between ethnic groups. I mean like intergroup within like generational, like these generational groups, like the boomers and the zoomers and them.
Yeah, okay, let me stop you. You're falling into a trap of every conservative that I've ever talked to. And what you're falling into the trap is you're warning about something that's already happened. Like everything you've described.
Could you say that again? I had a signal break.
Okay, conservatives always warn about something that's already happened. So conservatives now, you can find people, you know, like if you go read VDare or something, you'll be like, white America might no longer, you know, exist. Or it's like, guys, wake up. Like you're warning about something that is long gone.
Well, yeah, the average age of whites is like 58. Like
you're doing the same thing. You're describing everything that happened over the past 10 years as if this is some new great reset. What I'm saying,
no. I mean, it's going to be like overt violence instead of like socio. Yeah.
What the hell is J6? I mean, we've seen incredible activization, like brainwashing and what's the right word? Like energizing and so on that starts online, fucks with people's heads, and then spills out into the real world in violent ways. BLM, we've seen it. It's over. What's going to happen? You have to look ahead and like how phenomena in the world can change consciousness. Looking ahead, I think a lot of these divisions, because of the Russian threat, are going to dissipate. There's actually going to be a lot more unity in the country. And you could even see it in a degree with the kind of Russiagate stuff. Like, you know, as goofy and ridiculous as like Keith Olbermann rants were in 2016 and 2017, they were kind of hyper nationalist in their stupid way. And he literally wrapped himself in a flag and said that, you know, the Russian commies are in control of this country through Trump. Americans aren't. There was a kind of nationalist streak. And I think we're going to see this in a renewed form as this Cold War goes on among liberals. And I think liberals are going to become more nationalist. And the people who aren't are going to be the nonconformist, pathological populist. And so we're going to continue. I think some people will learn lessons. And so like Trump has already kind of flipped and taken back or, you know, or just moved on from comments or something because he wants a political career because he, you know, at the end, you know, he senses he in his gut, he kind of feels the social mood. People who are less intelligent, who can't conform in that way, in the, like Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever, even Tucker to a degree, because he's intelligent, but he's always playing to right wing Twitter people, and those are his writers. They aren't going to be smart enough to feel which way the wind is blowing, and they are going to lose so hard. It's just not going to be fun. They are going to be cast out because those pathological right wingers and populists just won't ever go with the flow of anything. They will say no to everything. They will take the other side in a fight. And so, like, Russia's the big bad. Oh, we're going to start, as MTG did, we're going to start promoting Russia propaganda. They're going to always fall into these traps. And it worked for a little while. COVID, I think, delegitimized them to a large extent. The neo-Cold War is going to totally delegitimize them. They are the ones that can't get along. All these there's a lot of psychopathology in the alt-right, and like a lot.
To be fair, the alt-right doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of a dead egregore.
It's the same thing. They changed the name because they don't like me. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. And it's the same people. It's the same exact people. Dissident right, alt-right, right-wing Twitter, babosphere. It's all these same people. They are not either intelligent enough to go with the flow, or they basically have a kind of pathology, a mental illness that they'll say no to everything and take the other side and resist and resist and resist. They're going to be crushed.
So, and I don't say this as and I don't say this as an attack on your character or anything, but it seems like these. Well, I haven't said it yet. Like, if you're going to take exception to it, let me say it first.
No, I was just joking, man. Calm down.
Oh, okay. In the climate, sometimes you have to take everything literally and then work from there. But I get you, man. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it seems that the distinction that you're making is essentially between what you see as reactionaries and what you see as the group that can go with the flow. But I cannot understand as a problem-solving tool just interpreting everything that's going on within a positive contextualization of events, how that actually, I can see how being able to see the good in situations is useful, functionally. Yeah. Optimism is great. It's important to not be black-pilled, so to speak, to embody hopelessness. But these people aren't generally actually reactionaries. A lot of these people fundamentally disagree on axiomatic presuppositions. Their building blocks of morality, for example, are sometimes very different. And you can critique that if you like, but the thing that I see is, and again, this is not an attack on your character, but it's almost like in any time that somebody identifies a threat vector, what you do is you just find a way to try to recontextualize it as actually it's a good thing. Yes. And what's weird is that you see this as a sort of one of the memes about how the psyop happens, where actually it's not happening, then evolves into if it was happening, it's a good thing. And now it's and then it evolves into, well, it happened and you deserved it. That's usually the trend. You see what I'm saying?
I understand, but you have to be able to see a few moves ahead and not just be this out of control immune system. When your immune system is unregulated or almost overly sensitive, what you have are allergies.
Methylation. I'm familiar.
Right. I have, I've suffered from eczema. It's not anything terrible, but I get eczema and I do things to work on it. My son has eczema. I mean, it's basically
vitamin B12 is awesome.
Right. I do a vitamin thing. That's great. And so I've actually kind of conquered this. So was he. I'm just using this as a mild
allegory,
basically. An allegory that you shouldn't take too seriously, but it's if you are this immune system that is just firing on every cylinder, you're going to be like people who have peanut allergies and they suffocate themselves because they ate a peanut. It's actually not a good thing. Like, that's what's happening. Those people who die due to peanut allergies, they have an unregulated immune system that is fighting off the dangerous threat of peanuts and killing the host at the end of the day. That's not a good thing either. And like, I do see this, like this, you know, I mean, let's put aside the siding with Russia, because I think that demonstrates a deep blackpilling and just kind of like traitorous aspect to these people that I reject in toto. But like, even
Well,
the
yeah,
kind of
but most
stuff,
of them don't actually side with Russia. That's the point. It's a proof of concept.
yeah, tell that to the judge. No one's gonna fucking buy that, man. I don't buy it, for one thing, and believe me, the FBI is not buying it either. So
are you saying that I'm not speaking in good faith, or are you saying that I don't represent the
I think
majority?
you are speaking in good faith. But like, people siding with Russia, you can give them some esoteric explanation for why you're doing that, and they're going to look at you with a twinkle in their eye as they throw you in jail or symbolically cast you out of society. Like, it's just not. But to go back to my metaphor,
But
before,
Spencer, do you
like,
think that would really happen? Like like you think American society is on the brink of like any kind of show of pro-Russian views to lead to certain
no, I don't.
situation
I
like
don't
that?
think American
Or,
society is.
I think
The
he was being
normies.
hyperbolic for effect.
all
Yeah,
right, fair enough.
I'm being hyperbolic here, but it's like the American society, 70% of them want a no-fly zone. I mean, American society is on board. I'm talking about right-wing Twitter. Like, you cannot get on the wrong side of this, and they have already made their bed. I mean, you know, you get on the wrong side of it in the first 24 hours, whatever, but like, you cannot do it. And you cannot just like express this like, oh no, this is actually a proof of concept metaphor. No one takes that seriously. You will be cast out for good reason. But to go back to the peanut allergy metaphor, so like, take kind of the incel thing. So the incels, if we take them at their word, and in fact, we give them a charitable reading, in fact, they want like women to be good housewives, you know, barefoot in the kitchen or out in a wheat field, something like that. They want them Christian and, you know, obeying orders and just doing, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's what they claim to want. But their choice in that, and you could say, being charitable, that is some kind of moral foundation. What that all, like, if you look at their actions and not that, they are putting themselves in the most anti-Darwinian situation imaginable. These people will never
certainly
pass on their genes. And so you can say that, like, if you're charitable, you can say these people are the ultimate traditionalists. They want strong families and mothers
not really.
out kids. Well, okay, I know I'm being overly charitable. I don't believe this. I think they're resentful freaks. But like, if I were to be overly charitable towards the incel community, I could say these are true Christians. They want the strong family and reproduction, etc. If you look at their actions and what they're doing, they have put themselves in a Darwinian bottleneck from which they will never escape. And that normie liberal who goes with the flow of society has 2 kids. And those trads who believe in strong families and talk about them all the day have 0 kids and will never have kids. That normie liberal who talks about, well, you know, gender is kind of a social construct, and so who am I to judge? He has 2 children. He's reproducing himself. Those crazy incels are not. So it's like, it's like the peanut allergy. They have this overactive immune system that literally kills them because the peanut is not a threat. And that normie liberal is in, like, I don't give a shit about your income or whatever. I've met or your education. I have met some of the dumbest people in graduate school. I have met the most boring ass people who make, you know, a couple 6 or 7 figures a year. I don't give a shit. But like, they have a future, and all of these trads don't. And yet you're telling me that I should listen to these people.
No, I'm not even saying that you should listen to them. I was just saying like it's a fascinating thing where it's like the problem solving tool at your disposal seems to be to not interface with the problem at all. And I understand
I'm
your
interfacing with the
critique.
problem. I'm trying to transform it. I believe in value transformation, transevaluation of everything. And you
Well, a
know, like, that's what I
recontextualization.
believe in. Yeah, recontextualization or reframing. You can reframe something to the point that you can understand that it leads in a different direction. And you could say that I'm engaging in wishful thinking, fair enough, but like, that's how, I mean, things change, values change, and circumstances change. That affects consciousness. And like, that's a much better problem solver than having an overactive immune system where you just hate everything and nothing can change and nothing can be accomplished. It's all horrible. NATO is gay. The West is nothing but transgender reassignment. I mean, if I thought that way, I would kill myself.
So again, I'm not saying that this is a bad critique because it's a completely valid critique. And I actually, whenever I interact with people within right-wing Twitter, one of my biggest things that I'm trying to grill into them is a way to temper the neuroticism, because the neuroticism, while it has functional utility as like an immune response culturally, and as a way of like actually instilling like a neurological way to get these people to give a shit about something, as opposed to the ambivalence of the libertarian who cares about nothing but cooming and consuming.
Right.
Like these things are natural, and natural things are useful. They should be utilized. And like what as a way of, I guess, reaching into your allegory. And don't get me wrong, I'm not about to defend incels. I'm going to simply, because I'm usually disgusted by each individual incel I've ever talked to.
Yeah.
Like deeply, personally, spiritually disgusted.
Yes.
But the issue usually with incels is that it has very little to do with what their beliefs or what their observations are. And it usually has to do with like sabotage psychosocial development. These people don't know how to be people. And they're after a point in development where they ever have the opportunity to learn how to be people, because the brain, has thresholds of development. Like a good example is like the hard line limit for the point at which it stops being easy to learn new languages.
Right.
Like intersocial dynamics happen before that, and a lot of these people they're almost groomed to failure, and it's really depressing to see, because like it didn't have to be that way. I mean, some of them are just fucking fuck ugly, and there's nothing that can be done about it. But like
I'm not
a lot of these
by
people,
it.
well,
I think it's
it's such
evolution in
a
action.
See, but I don't. I don't see. I
Why would
see
we
these things
want
as
these
usually
people to
engineered.
have a future? Well, even if that's the case, and it's engineered by feminism, who cares? What's important is that the weak are perishing.
So the reason why I care, it's the same reason why I
like,
don't like war, is because it's extremely dysgenic. It's deleterious. You lose the best people in war. When you have an engineered deleterious process that that basically preys upon children who don't even have a chance to express their genetic strength, like that's when, like when it is the case of the psychosocial sabotage, like it doesn't matter how fit they are genetically, they haven't even had a chance to go through differentiation,
But it's not
so like
that
that's
bad.
to address the metaphor.
It's not that bad, and the fittest will survive. And I do agree that like war, particularly 20th century war, you could probably say 19th century war, like, I mean, there's been studies of this, but I think World War I was like horrifyingly dysgenic, in the sense that you had middle and upper class people dying like flies. And so I get that. But like, you also, and I think, just judging you from what I've heard over this past 10 minutes or so, like, you agree with me that war is inevitable. It's stabilizing. It's a natural part of human life. Like, there is going to be conflict, and it is kind of overall, at the end of the day, eugenic, in the sense that we don't want a world in which there's no like war and conflict and death. Like, we want a world where you have the fear of death on your mind, and you have
Oh,
to
sure.
want to survive. So like,
I
all
would
of
want
this
a
stuff
more
that's
noble
happening.
war. I would want a more noble war for a more noble humanity, but obviously we don't get that. We always
You
get
don't get to
total war.
pick and choose,
Yeah.
and it just is what it is, and this is the war that we have. But I think it is ultimately going to be good. I mean, I could never bring myself to say like, oh, I'm glad this is happening, I want more of it, go for it. I don't, I if I could wave a magic wand and into this suffering Ukraine, I would. Just, I have a heart. But I also, as I'm able to take a step back, and I think about the kind of transformations, the just martial quality that's going to have to be summoned in the West, and that even that kind of fear of death, of nuclear annihilation, I only come to the conclusion that it is a great thing, and that it can actually conflict can sanctify any cause. I mean, it can. The question is, who's going to give it the cause to be sanctified? And and it's like, I think that's something that I can do, and I think it's something that the black pill Twitterati of the right wing just can't, because they hate everything. I don't hate everything. And so it's like, can we start, a war can sanctify any cause, as Zarathustra taught. And it's like, can we give this war a cause to be sanctified? I mean, maybe being overly generous, you could say that like right wing Twitter is trying to do that for Russia, but like, we don't live in Russia. I don't want to live in Russia. We live in the West. So it's like, what kind of cause will this renewed martial quality, this rearmament of the West, what kind of cause can we give it? And that gives me a lot of hope.
I see what you're saying, and like, I am getting to the point where I have to go just because it's getting real late for me.
Sure.
What I would say is, I think there are some people like I don't know how long it's been since you've been involved with I guess you could call them the esotericists of the right wing sphere. But I'll tell you what, if your DMs are open, oh, they're not. Okay. I want to link you to some people that are
Well, I
definitely
can
worth
follow
digging
you.
into.
I'll follow you, and you can.
Okay, because
You earned a follow due to this conversation.
yeah, thank
Congratulations.
you. And I followed you back. I never thought I would actually end up, because like you're kind of notorious in these spheres, but you seem to be a very respectable person, having talked to you. So I like that we can reach this.
Well,
And
yeah,
I'm
the
like,
alt
I'm
right
not an important figure, so it's not
hates.
about the clout.
No, don't say that. The alt right hates me with such a passion. Like, I'm sure if you listen to all these resentful little freaks, the only thing you would have learned about me is I don't even know what they say these days. But I don't care, because I understand the hamster wheel that they're on, and I understand the little echo chamber that they're in, and I don't want to do that. I actually want to contribute positively to this new world that we've entered. And I don't want to be a malcontent. I don't want to be irrelevant. I don't want to like, and if you are taking Russia's side here, and you're trying like, even if you have great metaphors, you're basically trying to just kind of defend this thing. um, I just don't see that as possibly working. And it's like, I actually do want to contribute to society. And, and it's like, we're entering a new stage of human history with this. We're kind of returning to the 20th century. So there's kind of like a new opening, for thought and for ways of like explaining what's happening to people. And again, if the alt right or the dissident right or whatever, if they want to jump off a cliff, fine, because that will allow like real people who have something positive to say to re-enter the game. That's how I look at it. But thanks for your comments.
Yeah,
We
of
can move
course.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do
send
have
me
to
a DM.
go. I'm gonna
Send me a DM.
DM you and
Yeah.
stuff.
Well,
All
you've
right.
got to man the library tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. Take it easy, man. Okay. Obvious sock bucket. You already spoke. Okay. Or have you? You've already spoken, right?
Yeah, I've already spoke. Sorry, mate.
Okay. Ultraviolet. Oh, we got a commie on here. Good. All right. Ultraviolet. Got the floor, commie. All right. Going once, going twice.
Hey, Richard.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Hi, Ultraviolet. Please speak.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I came into the space like a little bit after you started, so I guess I didn't really get to hear your full explanation of what changed your mind. But I was like kind of reading your tweets. And I really just wanted to say, Nazi punks, fuck off, bitch!
Okay.
Constructive.
Goodbye. Yeah. See how open-minded I am? I'm like, let's let the commie speak, and then you get that.
Yeah, some commies can be okay, Richard.
Well, I
yeah.
know, I totally know. So that's why
Yeah.
I let them in. But it's like, again, it's like you're just yelling at me. You're not allowing, you're not allowing any contribution to discourse to be made. I don't need to say more. Arthur
Hey.
Fleck, you're on.
Yeah, hi. I just had two quick questions. Did you see the Nick Fuentes and what was his name, Destiny debate?
I did not. How did it go?
The other question is, what do you think of No White Guilt?
I knew that guy many years ago. Not terribly impressed. It just I don't know. At best it's just kind of real basic stuff, and at worst it seems almost like some kind of weird Scientology or something. I don't know. I don't have any interest, to be honest. Those are your questions?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks. Taiga Shaman. You got the floor.
Hi Richard. Man, I had my hand up for a while. I'll try to articulate myself, but it is kind of late over here in Europe. It's like 4 a.m. in the morning. But I'll try to get my point across. Yeah, no problem. It was worth it. I mean, I wasn't here at the very beginning, but I did hear you exchanges with the previous several guests, and their questions kind of aligned with my angle of what I was going to ask you anyway. So I really enjoyed the previous conversations. Just to touch up on something you said earlier about you view because the Russian interests are inherently anti-Western, at least in the current times that we live in. You feel like if in any way you propagate or forward content that could be advantageous or for Russian interests, let's say, you will be viewed as a traitor or you will view yourself as a traitor, correct? And I'm just thinking, in this regard, what is the long-term strategic view like or goals that we could achieve? I mean, think of it this way, like
Who's we?
if people of above average intelligence in the West want to do everything they can to prolong this existing structure of NATO and America. Let's not do anything to sabotage this, or we will be traitors. What is the end game to all of this? Is it so that, in some sense, we could bid toward a time when the opportunity arises where we can reform the NATO and all this Western apparatus into something that's actually positive
Yes.
towards
I mean,
your goals?
Look, the whole notion that we're just going to burn it all down or something, that might appeal to me at 4 a.m. sometimes when I'm awake and depressed, but it's just not really a good idea. And I look, for my entire life or adult life, I have been pro-European unification. I mean, I read Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil at a very young age. I mean, this is just clearly the way that history is pushing us, and what is a good thing is for Europe to be one. So I've never got sucked into Brexit or anything like that. But I'll often hear from other people in the sphere like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we agree with you. We want a united Europe, but the EU's gay, and the EU's terrible. It's too much bureaucracy." So basically they have some like platonic ideal of like a united Europe, but then when something happens that brings about these things that makes the world better, they just instinctively reject it. They just can't accept it. So it's like, oh, we want Brexit, we want to tear down the EU, we hate it. When you have something like a Atlantic military alliance like NATO, that, and we have again Germany rearming within it, you have all these right wingers who just want to, again, call it gay. That seems to be their major criticism. Everything's gay. And they don't want to just like accept institutions that exist right now that are actually good and can be transformed into something better. They just want to instinctively reject everything. And that does strike me as the nihilism of a malcontent. The EU is a great thing. NATO is a great thing. And yeah, NATO lost its way over the 30 years, and I was, to a degree, right to criticize it. And to a degree, my criticism still holds. But things change, and things can be kind of renewed and return to their origins as they are right now. And so, like, yeah, I mean, America kind of sucks, but like it's where we live, and you have to believe that there's some way that this can become a better entity. The EU, it kind of sucks, sure, but it's where you live, and there's at least a chance to make it into something real. And I just see this like utter, just kind of nihilism in the polarized populism of the Trump era and Trump himself and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all this kind of stuff. It's just no, 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 no. Everything's bad. We hate everything. Anything that happens is wrong. We're gonna, and that ends up in taking the other side in a geopolitical struggle. We hate Joe Biden so much. We are just so pissed off that we are going to spread pro-Russia propaganda. We're going to demoralize everything. And I'm just tired of it. And again, it's why I've kind of left. I mean, I don't think I'll ever really leave the sphere because I'll always be associated with it. But to the degree that I can, I've just kind of said to hell with it and moved on from the right.
Thanks for clarifying that, Richard. Because I was also a bit confused in some of the earlier conversations when you kind of gave this idea of just relishing the return of the new Cold War and conflicts having tangible consequences to people living in the West, and how there's a return of this sense of life and death and danger and just
Yeah, I do
relishing all
relish
that.
all these things. It's
Uh-huh.
good.
Uh-huh. But I can understand now you still have sort of a clear goal of
Yeah.
actually wanting to achieve towards. So this made it more clear for me to interpret what you've just all said. But with that being said, I would like to just add on to the topic about uh, just aligning with the West for your or for our own interests. Um, the idea, well, like this meme of the current American demographics, American IQ and diabetes and so on, like this meme popped up a few times in this stream already. So just wondering, like in a scenario where Russia does crumble and NATO continues to expand, or the West expands in its maximum extent towards the current trajectory, anyways, um, we will see this expansion, and then I guess there would be no way to really change any of the previous pitfalls, the West has been in the predicament for the past decades, right? I feel like immigration is still going to be the same, and I feel like
Well,
the
yeah, I mean,
collective
God is
consciousness.
still dead. I mean, all of these problems are still there, but all of these problems exist in Russia too. I mean, like the nihilism of that has been within European societies for quite some time is still with us, and all of us are kind of struggling to overcome that, including Russians. And yes, it's going to be with us. But the question is kind of like, I don't believe in some kind of like death and rebirth concept where it's like it all has to just go up in flames and then a phoenix will rise or whatever. It's basically a Christian concept of like being crucified and then rising again. I mean, I don't agree with that. I think that's a very bad metaphor. I think that things undergo a kind of metamorphosis and a transformation. When world events change, your consciousness changes. And as you live through something, including especially living through suffering and pain and violence and conflict, you'll come out of it as something new. And that's the metaphor that I would use in this. And so it's like we're re-entering the 20th century with all that that entails. And can we become something better than we were over this past 30 years of the end of history, of just too much peace, too much luxury, no limits, just a sense of like one day, history is going to end and it's going to be like the what is it, the end of Wall-E, where just these, obese people sitting on electronic chairs watching television. It's just that kind of horrifying scenario that you can see being birthed by the age of globalization. I feel like we're out of that. That Putin's invasion, and he didn't intend this, but like Putin's invasion of Ukraine and his assertion of limits of a Russian sphere, asserting it with violence, whatever he intended, it does have the possibility of bringing us out of it. So there is some transformation. So I don't want the West to just burn down. And as I've told many people, like the West burns down, what is there? Who's going to win? Is it going to be like a renewal of the right wing or something? It's probably going to be a renewal of like primitive tribes or whatever. It's like so much would be lost. And it's like, but if we imagine like through conflict, there's a transformation, then I just think so much could be gained. But you got to be on the right side. You've got to be on the side of where you live, and you've got to be on the side of your country and your family and your people and your way of life. You can't be this malcontent who wants to root on Russia or spread Russian propaganda. Okay, I'm going to move on. So Luke 5, Luke from Canada.
Yeah. Okay, so I've been listening to you for a number of years, and I would say I kind of have a similar intellectual journey. Well, some of this is obviously not the same as you, but like when I listened to the alt-right back in the day, I was like a drug addict with like no future. And as you get older, you start to realize you actually belong to like this civilization. So on the Ukraine, there's a couple points. One thing that I think could be really positive from the war is I actually think this is a good chance for Europe to become like serious as a geopolitical bloc. Like, I feel like a lot of these countries have been living in a sort of fantasy world for a while, and and that's why I actually think if the war ends soon, it might be bad in the long-term sense because people will just jump back into that like fantasy life of like non-conflict, etc. Whereas if it drags out for a while, it could like weaken Russia, which is clearly like not on the side of the civilization that I belong to. And two, it could make, the Germans and others maybe come together with the French, and they might actually be able to start to hold their own weight, build up their own military, become more serious people, and like realize what actually is important in the world, as opposed to sort of, the kind of gay shit that the alt-right complains about but has no answers to, etc.
Yeah.
And then also, one thing that really turned me off from a lot of these people is like, I just can't take anyone serious who like whines about Raytheon or something. It's like they don't want us to have companies that build good weapons for us and stuff. Like they imagine that they're somehow like creating conflict, and then oh wow, they make profits off weapons. It's like, do you not want us to have what, you know, these people are
Well,
just so unserious.
there wouldn't be any conflict if there weren't ammunition suppliers. I mean, this is like a libertarian fallacy. Yeah, I would add to that what I've noticed among paleo conservatives as well is that they'll like look at Russia and they'll be like, well, look, this is Russia's sphere of influence and they're using hard power to achieve this end. It's all this like realpolitik when it comes to Russia. But then when it comes to their own country and their own sphere, that is NATO, like we can't do anything. So it's like NATO was encroaching on Russian lands. Oh my God. You know, so it's like we can't do that. We can't act as like a real actor with weapons and goals and spheres, etc. But then like everyone else can. And it's just, again, it's just this black pilling that I think did come about, demoralization that I think came about for understandable reasons due to the 2000s and all of these just like bad wars that America was involved in, where the paleo critique is basically other countries can do anything. Other countries can like live, but we must be dead. We can do nothing. So it sounds to me like all these paleos and paleo libertarians actually like the globalist world. Like they actually believe in the globalist propaganda because they totally reject the use of force. They totally reject armament and, you know, establishing spheres of influence. So it kind of sounds like they're the ones who want the end of history. They're like the Ron Paul type that's like, well, if NATO didn't exist, then everyone would be at peace and like we'd be trading and everyone would be happy and rich. And just these guys are just, it's all based on this like libertarian delusion.
And I think it's an extension of their nihilism, like because they think we've lost the plot, that we should just lose, you know, like we should just give up, where it's like that is the most like if you want to lead a civilization but you think that we should just lose because we suck now, it's like, do you think the Chinese, I don't know, 50 years ago when they had like a screwed up communist society that wasn't functioning, do you think they should have just gave up then, or do you think they should have tried to, you know, whatever they've done today? I don't want to live in that. I don't want to be under Chinese rule, but you have to admit that they've made things better than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So why should we be so easy? Like, why should we be so non-confident and just giving up on ourselves? I just don't see how that is a solution to anything.
Yes. Okay. Let's move on here. Yeah, Joel Schechtman, you were in there for a moment, then you disappeared. I was curious. He was a investigative journalist on espionage. If he wants to jump in, he can. I was curious about what he had to say. Let's go to the lightning round, because I said I was going to do this for an hour and we're well past 2. So Vishal Thankar. So let's try to keep everything brief. Vishal, you have the floor.
I speak next in 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes.
Give you 5? Okay. Gustavo Galvini Bogvini.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, man, what happened between you and Keith, man? I used to love to listen to you and Keith Woods along with Edward Dutton.
Well, Keith and I mean, we did something recently. I mean, we're fine. I think Keith just kind of wanted to go his own way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Sick Vic.
Yeah. So, what do you think? You think Russia is in fault, is the bully, or Russia is doing the right? Is Russia, doing the right thing by like going to war with Ukraine?
Well, Well, I mean, I think you can fairly call them a bully, but I mean, I understand what Russia is doing. I don't think Putin is a madman. I think Putin has real objectives. He sees Ukraine, as he has said, he sees Ukraine and Russia as one entity, and he wants to reunite the family. And he wants to reestablish a sphere of influence that is very similar to the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire. I mean, I get it. But again, he's not on my team. So, I can respect an adversary without endorsing him.
Yeah, I feel you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
all right, Matt. Well, I got to go fast now. You can say something really quick if you want.
Oh, I was just saying all this money he's wasting on war and killing people, and now everyone hates him. So now I think he's screwed up.
We'll see whether he becomes the next Peter the Great or whether he's assassinated by his own generals. His life is on an edge. Thank you for your comments. All right. Lightning round. JP Jodel. Radical for freedom, anti-state, anti-war, pro-market. Oh, God. Libertarians. JP Jodel, going once, going twice.
Richard.
There you are. Hey.
When did you become such a naive statist puppet?
I've always been a naive statist puppet.
Well, no. I mean, back in 2016, 17, you...
I was a statist then.
Well, I mean, but you were on the fringe side of it. Now you've kind of become more mainstream.
Yeah.
But what
I've always been a statist. I flirted with libertarianism in kind of the Ron Paul days and when I was in my 20s, but I've really at heart never been a libertarian. And I do think, I mean, I like plenty of libertarian people, but I do think that your entire moral, political, and economic system is based on a fallacy.
No, but I have a question for you.
Okay.
I feel like everything that you kind of stand for today is kind of like a backlash at, Trumpism, because you feel that it kind of backstabbed you.
You could say that. Not very charitable, but you could say that to be more charitable, you could say that I learned from the failures of populism and I've rejected it.
Well, but don't you feel that everything, it's kind of like it's so reactionary? Your politics.
It is. My politics are reactionary?
Yeah, in response to the way, you kind of felt backstabbed by Trump and his followers, or your old followers.
Yeah. You could say that. I mean, I think it's very uncharitable, or you could say I've kind of learned something about it because I've stayed true to my journey. And, some old followers and old friends don't want to go on that journey, and that's fine. I don't think anything can be gained from Trumpism. You live and learn.
All right.
But it just seems like you're describing it uncharitably. I'm describing it as charitably. All right, let's move on. Hunter Stern. Lightning round time.
Richard, yes, hello. Shabbat Shalom. So I'm a Jew, but I'm ethnically an Ashkenazi, but spiritually I'm a Promethean. I'm an esoteric Georgianist. And basically...
Okay. So G Monkey, you've got the floor.
Hey, thank you, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity. I just wanted to ask you, you just said recently, just now, a previous speaker, you said that you don't believe Trumpism is the way. In watching everything that's happening now between Russia and Ukraine, I just feel that, is Asia in regards to China, Russia with Putin, China with Jinping or whatever his name is, and don't you kind of feel we have to match their strength, our strength with their strength? In other words, don't we need the American version of a Putin? And the only person that's closest to that I feel that is Trump. You know, a lot of people say, well, you know, this would have not happened if Trump was in power. And I kind of feel like people overlook that or brush over that a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, what do you mean by we need our own version of Putin? Like, we need a gangster, corrupt person who grifts off the entire
Not a
economy
gangster.
and establishes oligarchs. I mean, I don't,
No,
I know is the answer. I mean, do we need a tough guy in office? Yeah, sure. But like, we're going to probably get that.
you know
I mean,
what you say the oligarchs piece. You know, it's looking more and more that they have Putin misunderstood because the oligarch. It seems that Putin has issues with the oligarchs. You know,
yeah, he does.
I don't even think he realized how many assets the oligarchs had abroad. You know, all these yachts that got repossessed, these vacation homes in Miami. Yeah, I don't want to get sidetracked with that, but what I meant to say is that it just seems the world is going back to tribalism in a sense, and you know, we saw this in the Middle East, we saw this in Iraq, we saw this in Saudi Arabia. I just kind of feel that the world is changing, and we need to adapt quickly.
Well, I've said that. I think the world is changing, and I think we're going to become more right wing as a result. But I don't think Trump is the answer, and I don't think like reactionary populism is the answer. I actually think the kind of liberals that are going to come out of this, or the kind of conservatives, I mean, I'll make a bold prediction. I mean, I think Mitt Romney has a political future. And I really liked it when he just called people traitors. Thought that was right for the time. Tulsi spreading Russian disinformation. Don't beat around the bush. Just call her a traitor. Thought that was awesome.
Appreciate
Okay,
it.
RGM, you're up.
Hi. I had a long question requires a long answer, so I won't ask it.
Oh no. Okay.
I won't ask it. I'll ask something else. What about this petty anti-Russianism? It's not a profound question, but for example, the Space Foundation stripped Yuri Gagarin of its his Yuri's Night, and Tchaikovsky is being stripped. It strikes me as rather petty for
I
the
agree.
project.
I agree with that. I agree with that. That's the worst response to this is like, let's not play Tchaikovsky at the symphony. Let's demean actual Soviet achievements. I agree with that.
But does that suggest we're not going to be up for it?
No, it doesn't. That's a kind of unfortunate excretion of the kind of bifurcation that's happening. It is a demonstration of hatred, but you need to have some hatred to fight. But reasonable people can keep it under control. All right, real quick. These have to be really fast. Wolf, Nazir. I think that's what your name is. Nazir Ahmed Bukhari. Oh, you requested it. Okay, let me do this, guys. If I answer everyone, we're going to be here another hour. So as sad as it is, I think I'm going to put a bookmark in it. I really am sorry about that, but I only have so much time, and I got to get going.
Can I ask a question? Like, make a request for the next time you do one of these?
Okay, sure.
So I just, because I think about geostrategy a lot and stuff, I think about like NATO and Turkey and the Gulf allies and things like that. So would you be willing to discuss how you see like non-European states in the context of like this like geopolitical conflict between like this multipolar world of United States, Russia, China, etc.? Like, would you be able to? Do you know much about that? Because like, I know the Gulf
I know
states
something about it. Yeah, I mean, I think Turkey is definitely a different country at the moment. I won't. Let me read up and think on that, and then we can maybe do a space on that.
Okay, maybe look at Michael Duran and Luke Coffey Michael Durand, Luke Coffey. They're like guys who are like pro NATO and like pro Turkey and push back against this like get rid of Turkey out of NATO nonsense. So yeah, just want to throw that out there.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, guys. I will talk to everyone soon. Thank you for listening. And thanks especially to those who ask questions, even the commies and haters. I will talk to you guys soon. These are great and good discussion. All right. Bye bye. Ciao.